Well, like I said, welcome. My name is Joy DeBolt. I work here at SAS, and I have the great pleasure of presenting you all with Gary Mailer from our R&D team here at SAS. He has a great presentation for you this afternoon, so we'll go ahead and let Gary get started.
Okay. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me okay, folks. Those who have headsets, those who don't, if you're close, I'll try and speak a little louder than usual, so I hope that's not distorting the sound. Thank you for coming. I'm here to talk about modernizing to SAS Viya. So my role, I'm in SAS R&D. I run a group called the Migration Division. So we've been focused on helping customers migrate mostly from SAS 9 to Viya 4. We're also getting involved in Viya 3 to 4, and hopefully we'll be building more infrastructure to make the next whatever migrations easier for you. So we're here to talk about modernization. And there's a little quote in the corner there. I saw that on one of the signs out in the lobby. Tomorrow's AI starts with today's data. So that's sort of the theme here. You've been doing a lot of great things with SAS over the years. If you want to leverage computer vision, co-pilots, synthetic data generation, all that stuff on the Viya platform, we have to get you there and make sure that your data, your infrastructure and everything is there. I want to talk about that. So this is sort of our story. We want to get you to next gen architecture. We want to unlock AI-driven development. Co-pilots are awesome. If you've ever used one, a co-pilot in development, anyone? Has everyone used one of those? We use those at SAS, but it really helps with getting the process started, and using that with SAS language is something we're surfacing in Viya, and it's going to be of great value to you. We're going to be innovating the Viya platform continuously going forward, so it's a good place to be. SAS 9 is still an awesome platform. It's not going away anytime soon, but it is more or less what it is, and if we want higher scalability or AI, we'd love to get you to the next level platform. So, what do I mean by tips and tricks? Well, we talk to people, right? At this conference and in calls, I talk to customers all the time, almost every day. Usually it's when they have trouble, but that's why they talk to us, right? We want to figure out what's going well, what's not going well with them, and we work with consultants, whether they're third parties or SAS services folks, and try and understand what's working well, what's not working well in terms of migration and modernizing. We want also to help you understand the opportunities in Viya. Right, we want to make sure you can run there, but not just get there, probably flourish there. Right? We don't just want to put your data there, we want to make your data there so it performs better, or maybe has lower storage costs, or other sorts of parallel benefits. We're looking at successes. We're also trying to understand places where things ended up being more costly than we had intended. Cost means you move something over there and maybe it's harder to get working, or it's harder to make sure it's validated correctly, or things like that, and we're looking into that and trying to bring ideas back when you tell us you have problems, what we need to do better for automation or streamlining processes. And then finding, the last part is automation. We've worked with a lot of customers that have lots of content, millions of SAS programs, tens of thousands of data sets, tens of thousands of enterprise guide projects, tens of thousands of DI Studio jobs. They're all valuable, and we want to get them there as cheaply and as reliably as possible. And so if we can automate more and more, and we're going to continue focusing on that, we'll be doing better. So there's 3 stages we're going to talk about. One is understanding what you have, which then segues into a planning process of knowing how does what you have of value get into the Viya platform. And then we're going to execute the modernization plan, and then hopefully when we work with some customers, they're actually validating how successful they've been. How do things work? How do they perform? Are they as reliable as they expect? So, show of hands, is anyone on stage 3 of modernizing to SAS? Okay. Is anyone on stage 2 of modernizing? Okay, I see a few hands, that's good. If you have things to share, whether it's during the session or we have a booth later on, we can talk about what's going well or not going well. I'm assuming most people are in stage 1, which is trying to understand what you have, and that's really the bulk then of what we're going to cover here with our time, is understanding what you have, how we can make the most of it, and getting on with it. So one of the things we're going to spend a lot of time talking about is an application called SAS Content Assessments. It's something you may have heard about. It's a download on the SAS site. I'll put a QR code up in a minute here where you can see where it is. And that's really a set of tools we've built that help you understand what content you have. And from that, then we can start getting to other parts of it. So one of the things we're going to look about, and there's the little QR code. If you go there, you have to have a SAS profile. And if you don't remember your SAS profile password, you're going to have to look it up. But if you go there, you'll be able to download it, and even if you don't intend on using it, there's wonderful documentation in the package you'll download that will help you understand what we look at, what the value is, and other things as well. So the things we're going to look at on the left side, data, programs, and things, we're going to also look and help you understand maybe how often you use something. Just because you have 1 million SAS programs, you may or may not want all those 1 million SAS programs to have to work in Viya and be validated and supported. So we're going to get into notions of hot and cold and other sorts of things in terms of data and things. And then we're going to get into whether there's concerns of things that have need further assistance. So let's start with what you have. Oh, by the way, some QRs, and we have them in the booth, so we have videos on some of this stuff already. So if you're not following all this stuff here and want to follow up on YouTube, that's something we can help you with. So first off, we always want to start understanding what we have. So we have an application we call the inventory. If you've ever been to a grocery store, in the old days at least, they would go around and count how many boxes of cereal are left, how many bars of soap haven't been sold. You have to know what you have, right? In the inventory, we look all over the place. And here's some output from an inventory run. This particular system we looked at had over 1 million SAS programs, about 760,000 data sets. That's not unusual for an estate of SAS that's been around for a long time. So understanding what you have is the first stage to understanding what you want to get to. So we look for all kinds of things. We look at tables, we look at mining results, we look at RTDM, real-time decision manager. And again, that's the first stage of understanding what you have to figure out where we want to go. So if you haven't ever looked at the inventory, I'd recommend you do. It's pretty easy to run. Again, you download it, it needs some special permissions, but we'll look at your metadata server, we'll look at the file system content and tell you what you have. And then we can go on with that. And then we look at, more specifically, things about data. So these are the questions. We're going through tips and tricks. So the first tip was run the inventory. The second tip is let's understand the data. So how much data do you have? Libraries, tables, how much space? You know, if you're thinking about modernizing, for a lot of people, that's moving to the cloud. As you're moving to the cloud, that's a different cost structure because you're paying for the storage that you might have already paid for if you're on-prem with SAS 9. So understanding how much space is being used and maybe storage opportunities to be more economical or more efficient or more performant, those are things that are going to be valuable. And also we'll look into other things. We can help you see whether you have replicated content. You'd be surprised how many customers we look at that have copies of stuff all over the place. It happens, but if you don't understand what you have and you're just going to lift and shift to the cloud, you're going to make copies of copies and not something you're going to be happy with. So we're going to talk about ways to identify those things. So here's some sample output from a customer simulation here where this customer had 400,000 data sets, 194 gigabytes of storage, and these are the things that come out of reports. Once you've run the content assessment, when we look at the inventory, we also have a profile for data sets, things that we will help you understand to understand what you have. So we'll understand how many things are accessible and all of that. So things that come out of here are opportunities for compression, opportunities for more advanced storage, things that were most not recently used, and I'll show some examples of that. Maybe that's too small to read, but when we're looking at inventories, it's pretty easy. When you look at a report, that's the whole benefit of analytics and reports. We can see that we have duplicates just by sorting. So when we run the inventory, we can see, wow, there's a whole bunch of copies of 2 gigabyte files. I better clean those up, or I better at least not replicate those as I'm migrating. So there's a lot of things we can look in here. We can also look at modification and access dates. A lot of people will have cold data. It just happens, things that in some cases may not have been modified for years or decades. We want to help you understand what those things are and figure out what you're going to do with those. Next, we'll want to look at SAS programs. So what have you been doing in SAS all along? Where are they stored? What features are being used? What are the aspects that may work well where you are, but may not work well as you move to next gen, as you're leveraging AI or doing things on the cloud? So the good news is, if you got SAS code, it's pretty much going to work, right? Procs are still procs. Proc means, proc sort, GLM, all of those things are fine in Viya. It's just some of the things that are related maybe to security or file system locations are going to be problems that we have to help you understand and address. So, for instance, where your SAS code is, we'll help you see how many items you have, where they are, and access dates, right? There's people, sometimes some of this code, this is from real world situations. If the last time a SAS program was modified in 1999, anyone want to guess how valuable that SAS code may be? 26 years ago, probably not even used. So those are kind of things we would look at and put in the bucket of interesting, but not something I'm going to care about as I'm thinking about my transition modernizing. Again, that what we call hot and cold. We do the same sort of thing for DI Studio jobs, enterprise guide, mining models, all sorts of things. So again, we're really talking about understanding your estate to figure out what you have and what to do with it. Then we look in the code and see what you did. So we'll look at code. In this case, we looked at about 1.2 million SAS programs, lines of code. Good job to this site. They have 193 million lines of SAS code. They've been writing SAS code for decades, and good. And then we want to find out how compatible it is. Like I said though, the good news is most of it's going to be compatible, except for a few things. So, anyone ever used the X command in SAS 9? It's awesome, isn't it? It's really cool. You can remove files, you can change permissions, you can load Excel, you can do all kinds of things. But it's a huge security hole if you don't understand how often it's being used. I remember working with an insurance company in the Midwest, and they didn't think anyone was using X command by policy, and then we found tens of thousands of uses of it, and they said, you know, we've got to stop that because our security protocol means we shouldn't use it, and particularly if we're going from on-prem to a cloud, and that cloud could do anything we want, then we're in a less secure environment. We don't want the X command at all. So we can flag the cases where it's used, and we can show you the lines of code where it's used. Now it's up to you to figure out what to do with those things. Do you still need to change permissions or all of that? But those are important things to understand so we don't propagate those security concerns forward. And there's some examples of others. We have proc HTTP, we can do pipe, sign-on, proc SOAP. They're all really powerful things, but if you don't understand what's being used and you start making web service calls out on the web or out on the cloud, that may not be good. So we'll help you find those things. And I'm not going through a lot, but we have a demo station, you can look at stuff. We show you really detailed reports. You can see the lines of code, what lines they're on, and determine what you want to do with those things. And here's some examples of that. And this is an interesting customer. They were just running X command to launch Excel. It seems innocuous, but if someone changes excel.exe to hackerprogram.exe wherever you're running, that's a big problem. So good to run, good to understand, and not propagate as you're going forward. Next challenge is understanding where all your resources are. You know, SAS code, like I said, is going to run. Your procs and all of that stuff will run, but where do the libraries point to, right? If you're on a PC or using C:\my documents, anyone run PC SAS and have data scattered all over? We see that a lot. You don't have to raise your hand, but it happens. And what are you going to do about it? Well, we want you to first know where they are, and then since it happens so many times, we have tens of thousands of these, we have utilities that will help you change them. It'll edit your code, basically, and do substitutions, gross substitutions on them if you know where you want your data to go to. So that's another thing to think about is, first off, where your data is, where your references are, and libname's one of them, but also including, percent includes, using in-file statements. That's another place where we want to help you understand where all the code is so we can help fix it. And we have batch processes because we heard that people are finding these things all over the place. So part of this is really about where do you want your storage to reside in the cloud. As you're modernizing, you could just lift and shift and say, I have a bunch of data sets. I just want to put a bunch of data sets on the cloud and NFS storage on Azure, AWS, awesome. But there's going to be a cost structure to that. You'll have to understand what that means, and so it'll help you understand. So understanding how much storage you have is important. A lot of people are actually considering Git, you know, for enterprise guide projects or SAS code, things that had been in the file system or had been stored inside. Why not modernize to a source control system? There's a great benefit to at least rollback and other sorts of things. We do that in our code all the time. We couldn't deliver enterprise class software without source control. So people are thinking about Git, so understanding where things are and where you want to move them to is important as well. Parquet, anyone using Parquet storage or understand what that is? Okay, well, you're probably going to hear about more of it in the opening, one of the tech sessions tomorrow in the morning session. But if you're just storing data sets, which a lot of people do, and you're storing text strings in data sets, and you know how data sets work, they have fixed width strings. You know, I'm a programmer too, I don't want it to fail, so I'm going to make all my strings really long. Well, that's huge when you store them in SAS data sets. They perform well, but they're costly to store, and if you're paying for NFS storage in the cloud, that's something you may not want to persist. So there's recommendations we can make about finding things that have a lot of long string storage, possibly storing in Parquet. And we're working on ways, launching this summer, to make data access in Parquet a lot quicker and more reliable for folks. So Parquet is something to consider. You'll also see talks about Speedy Store, another database store that sits underneath Viya, different ways to access storage if you've been using SPDS. Anyone using SPDS on SAS 9? Maybe not? Okay. It's been around for a long time, but it's a scalable performance data server. It didn't survive the move to Viya, but we're working in CAS with a partner, Single Store, to make sure we have fast parallel access. So that's another thing we can see by looking at how your data is stored. I talked about how we can help you modify bulk SAS code. Well, we have an application called Modify SAS Code, appropriately named. After having scanned all your SAS code, we can find places where you have references to libraries and things like that. The process we help you go through is to create a mapping file, old to new mappings, like C:\my documents becomes /NFS/ web storage. Great stuff. And then we can run programs that will stream through and do bulk edits on your SAS program. Now, you don't have to use it, but if you really have this, as often as we see in many, many customers, you're going to want to use this application a lot as you're considering modernization. Or any transition, if you're going from dev to prod or changing data providers, there's things we can help with by editing SAS code using these utilities. So we talked about data, SAS programs. There's also Enterprise Guide and DI Studio jobs. People use them a lot. There's other things we can do. And what we will help you understand is what we call no code and low code. I think you heard Brian Harris mention that briefly this morning. We love it when people can have a program experience where they don't necessarily have to write every line of code themselves. Sometimes they do, but other times they're going to want to point and click and have a no code or low code environment. That's what EG and DI Studio are used for. So we help you see where those places are in your code and benefit from them. They migrate to SAS Studio flows, and we'll help you see how your transforms used make that either a good experience or a maybe not perfectly good experience. The good news is most DI Studio jobs and EG projects will work just fine. However, some of the things may not run in low code, no code. We may translate them into SAS code blocks for compatibility. The reason we're doing that is a couple of reasons. One is SAS Studio is still evolving. It doesn't have all the features yet that we had in DI Studio and Enterprise Guide, but we're getting close, and we can identify things like, in this case, we used to have a Speedy Server table loader. Well, in Viya, we call it just a table loader. It's a little different. Most options work, and some are different, but we'll make that transition as we help you migrate those projects over. In another case, SAS Studio doesn't really have a loop construct yet that people are familiar with in DI Studio. Anyone use the loop in DI Studio? Yeah. It's getting there. It's not there yet, but we can help you understand where they are and have something that will still perform it, but it'll be SAS code based until we get there. Now we have a feature we call remigration that we have out in migration land already, so you can remigrate things, and when things get better in Studio, we can fix them up for you. So if something went to a code node and now supports a native node, we'll be able to do some transitions and fix that up. So we're getting better at that. So lastly, I'm sort of crunched on time here, but we also want to talk about another tip, understanding how often your code is used. And so there's a couple of things we'll talk about, whether your jobs are scheduled. If they're scheduled, chances are they're important to you. They're running nightly, weekly, monthly. Those should be probably your top priority for batch jobs, and we'll help you identify, and we have reports that'll show you those things. They're triggers based on time or file events, and we've talked to customers. One customer had 120,000 jobs they run every day. That's a lot. Now, wish them luck getting all that migrated and revalidated, but that's something that we help you understand where the volume is, and that's important to understand. How many things have been run recently? We can look at your logs to the extent the log files are saved and see how long your programs run, how recently they've been run. That's another key for the hot programs versus the cold programs that might not be that important to you. We also can look at how well things are running, how long things run, and we'll come back to that later. And we can also help look at workload. How many users are using your system, every day, and that's an important thing as you're doing provisioning to figure out what scope of system, what scale of system you did on Viya. So again, we're just gathering data about what you have to help you plan for the future. So Once you've done all that planning, and I'm just scratching the surface here because we don't have a lot of time, there's dozens of other things we can help you with, but these are some of the high points, the tips to look at first. We want to help you execute the modernization plan. And unfortunately, that's a build slide. We'll just go through that. First of all, provision your system. If you know how big it is, make sure you have the right capacity on your cloud. Set up security. You never do anything in the cloud without security having been set up. So if you're modernizing, try and get that in first. Set up your data, set up your ETL flows, and start modeling. And then start building things up as you can grow your system. So for high volume activities, we have tools that help from the planning phase into the execution phase. So we have tools, the first to create SAS packages, import SAS packages. If you've got thousands of those, you can feed us the list out of the inventory process and we'll generate all those packages for you. And we can import all those packages so you don't have to type them in or run them interactively. So this is where we're starting to get into economizing your time on the high volume processes, and we have things that we can help you with there. Finally, and again, trying to compress things so we have time for questions, sharing some insights onto how other customers have been validating when they finally get to that stage of validating. So there's different ways that people look at it. Sometimes they're just seeing, is the data there? Is the data there? If the data's there, that's a good sign that it worked mostly. Some people are looking at the number of errors and warnings on their new environment. Is it comparable to the old? That signs, it's a good sign. Are they running okay? How are things performing? And I'll step through these real briefly, but we have a lot of that data that we got in the planning process. If we know how big your data is, we happen to know how many rows and columns. We call them observations of variables. That's good data to look at when you're running new things on the Viya platform to say, if I had 100 rows and 3 columns, do I still have 100 rows and 3 columns? And we make that easier because we gathered that data. Another way people are validating is looking at errors. Well, we're looking at logs, we can capture your logs, and guess what? There's a lot of errors in a lot of people's logs that we've seen. It just happens. Sometimes the thing seems to run okay, they're innocuous errors, but you still need to understand where they are because you don't want to chase them over again on the new system. Our output being created correctly, another thing as we're seeing here, you may not be able to read that, but as we're looking through logs, we can see which steps created how many rows and columns of data, and you can see that things are running correctly or not. And finally, looking at runtimes. How did things run? If they're running too slow, bad sign for performance. If they're running too fast, they probably are failing. So there's different things to check out in validation, and we've learned this from talking to customers. So I've talked about a bunch of tips. You know, if you go through these, hopefully if you want to talk to me more about them or you couldn't hear me at all, we're in booths just over on the other side there, but there's a lot of things hopefully we can help you understand. And one more thing, you know, you can also share your results with SAS. These tools can be uploaded, we obfuscate the results, and if your account team wants to work with you, we can upload the data and then start developing a plan that's customized for you. So that's an important thing, and I know our partners do some of that as well. So there's a lot of talks about this topic. I have 1 minute left, so I'm rushing through here, but thank you for your time. And we're at the Data and AI Innovation at SAS Viya booth. There's my email address, so if you want slides or want to talk about this, you can go ahead and do that. There's a bunch of stuff on the community site, and I don't know if we're going to have time for Q&A right here because we're full, but I can be right here for questions, and thank you so much for your time. Sorry we rushed through a lot, but there's a lot to cover. Thank you all.